Hi there, welcome to the Dylan Rounds case. In recent time, new life has been brought back into the case and new perspectives of your interest. Today we continue that by looking back at Dylan Rounds' phone when it was later retrieved from a deep forensic dive by authorities and experts out there, coming across the time-lapse video from Dylan's phone in Brenner's trailer, which was of some kind of incriminating evidence to tie Brenner with all the other findings along the way to the murder of Dylan Rounds. I'm looking at it today because kind of influenced from last night's video, what was being talked about, some interesting points mentioned there, and also seeing on the Find Dylan Rounds Facebook page a new post there regarding it, but not news updates like that, just referring back, and maybe some people are a bit slow or new to the case hearing about it. So, you see the side of new people coming on in, but you also can be reminded of things that have happened in the past. And when it comes to the phone, I've not really looked at many dedicated articles about all this, about the phone and what was found on it. Countless news articles with time have made brief references, right? And the brief description, that's it. Let's look at a dedicated article today, which we may or may have not looked at already, and see if there's any additional important details that were missed the first time round, or if there's any contradictions that don't quite make sense with what we supposedly know of. That is what we're going to be doing today. So, if you want to catch up on the recent video, and the one that's been influential towards this new video itself, top right corner of the screen where the I symbol is, you click on that and you'll be able to find a video from last night and the playlist of the case which I've covered, and you can catch up on it all when you do have time. As for everybody watching right here, right now in this live premiere, welcome. Feel free to share your thoughts, opinions and reactions in the live chat box on the right hand side of the screen. And also, just in general, if you do have any questions, any points, any opinions or responses to this video, to Dylan Rounds' phone, the possibilities of it, etc., leave all your thoughts underneath this video in the comment section, because it will help spread awareness on the case and just help with the engagement. Down below in the pinned comment section, you'll see my comment with additional links. If you want to support this channel in some way or another, there are available things to do so, right? So I think with that all said and done, the order of how we can do things today is by just briefly looking at the comments from last night, which will complement what we're talking about today. And it will follow the order. And you get a bit of like a sneak peek or a brief peek at what we were talking about last night in case you haven't watched it already. Just so you're a bit more familiar, keep people up to speed on stuff and where we're currently at. Because the biggest overall theme that's been consistent up to now is things that I've said and questioned I've not mentioned before, because you're not going to think of everything at the time. So that's why there's no harm in returning back to something in particular. And with this case, with this event in particular, not really looked at it as deep as other things. So we might as well shine the light on it and see where we go from there, right? As for other breaking news or news in the background, doesn't seem to be the case. The Find Dylan Rounds Facebook page has gone quiet, but I will make a reference to it a bit later before we get into the main stuff. First of all, let's just look back at the comments last night, answer any questions, see what people had to say. Adjusting it to the latest, let's work our way up. Not too many. We got Skeptical here saying we'll watch on replay. And that's what you did. Found it interesting. That's good. We got Cleo there. Shout out to Cleo. Just recently, she managed to reach 10,000 views on one of her short videos on her channel, which is quite big numbers. We got Taylina here saying, at least you can say my name right. I did also say that I can also do it in an American accent if that's what you want. So maybe tonight we've got Taylina. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I extended my words because I'm being a little bit petty right now. Don't worry, Taylina. All under control. Or should I call you Tay-Tay, Lil Tay, Whatever it may be, it's fine. Yeah. May not come to the best reception now, but it doesn't matter. We got Glenn there. We got Jasmine saying, love your content. You're welcome. Welcome to the channel. I don't think I've seen you before, so it's good that you like the videos. Let me know how you came across my channel, whether it be through this case still in rounds or maybe a different one. Let me know. We got Skeptical here saying, another spot on RAF report, news report. Many unknowns around Don Hatley. What did he know and when did he know it? Would a man who turned over Brenner to LE and cried when talking about Dylan know what happened to him? You're right about Brenner as well. Could someone who keeps clothing of evidence in his trailer, boots behind a dirt mound and video records himself cleaning a gun be the sole mastermind behind Dylan's disappearance? A mystery for sure. Now, as I was pointing out, you know, if it's definitely Brenner and only Brenner to have disposed Dylan Rounds and do it successfully, yet the other bits of evidence along the way wasn't done quite the same, such as the phone, his own shirt when the murder took place, etc. That's probably because he was in a rush, right? He did the most important thing first and put time and effort into that, let's just say, because Dylan hasn't been found, has he? But then all the other stuff, which is insignificant to Brenner, or at least based on his time scale, thinking he's got all the time in the world to dispose of stuff with time and be lazy in the process, he was caught off guard when the police and the family's presence came on down to the area concerned about Dylan. I don't think Brenner was anticipating that, hence why he got sloppy and made mistakes along the way. Even if he did appear cool and calm and cold, still made some slip-ups, right? Which incriminated himself, made him look guilty, or responsible, let's call it that, right? The bit about Don Hatley, I mean, it's an interesting point that I don't know if it should be saved for a separate video. But I believe it was Ty Corbin that said he heard or saw Don directly crying, breaking down, sad, upset about Dylan. Now, was Candice Cooley was just in rounds breaking down and upset at the moment, at the beginning, were they? Didn't seem like it. Now maybe a day or two passed, but like when Heavy D and his crew came on down, Justin Candice Cooley obviously being worried but not upset. Fast forward a bit later with one of the East Idaho News interviews, the early ones, Candice Cooley was on the verge of breaking down and crying, but she held it together, right? Now, if you think about it, it would make more sense for the parents, or if you want to be petty, one of the parents to be really upset and break down and cry early on when they hear about their son going missing, that worry, that concern, the uncertainty. And yet they didn't. They held it together. They did the best they could at the time. But someone like Don Hatley, who, okay, in the presence and proximity of Dylan here and there, but considering that they had a falling out, right, before Dylan went off for 6 weeks to do the custom farm work, they had an argument, they parted ways. Did Dylan fire Don? Well, it was more so Don walked away from working for Dylan, right? So it ended on a negative note, right? Is that the reason why Don was upset? That he never got to apologise or make things up, patch things up with Dylan before what happened? Could that be the upset factor? Or would it be more so that Don feels a level of guilt within him because he's responsible for something, or guilt saying that he knows what's happened but he can't say anything about it? As said, maybe we leave this to a separate video, could be a short one, but talking through the emotions of Don Hatley, which was supposedly displayed, okay? Key points by Skeptical there. And we've got Sun saying, Warlike Raf, I agree with you absolutely, as quoting me, as if they have put a protective shield around it. It's as if they have gone out of their way to avoid searching Don's place unless the LE have searched it without our knowledge. But your point is valid and on target. Perhaps someone incinerated Dylan on the barbecue day. In that aerial footage, something looks burnt. Does it really? from your aerial photo and a lot of holes. Interesting. Should be searched. Thanks again for another well thought out video. Excellent map presentation. So you're welcome there. Appreciate that. In terms of from what was said last night by Taylina, Don Hatley's place, what we were looking at is supposedly not Don Hatley's place, but we can still use it as a marker for now because it is a two-way street, right? There'll be people out there that do know the location of Don's place, but they don't want to give it away because it could compromise the location and lead to burglary and theft. I understand that. But those people, not at any point can they or are in a position to get triggered or annoyed by somebody covering the wrong area like a wild goose chase if that genuine outsider has no clue where the true location of that place is. That's just a little heads up in the background, but Taylina at this moment, patient and understanding, so that's fine there. But it is like a two-way street. If one person knows the knowledge of the location, but there's reasons behind why they can't give it, well, the person that doesn't truly know where it is and just aimlessly going about, it's not their fault either, right? Two-way street. But that's just a separate point there. So I appreciate what Sun says here in her comment, or their comment. The form of desecration. So with the aerial footage, I will need to do a separate video, and I think the odd person said they wanted to see that. I'll do an aerial satellite update analysis of certain places of interest, because from the looks of it, and I have checked a few times now, I can confirm to you, not Google Earth Pro, not Google Maps, not Bing Maps, but specifically Google Earth, the base version, what I've been using since day one. As outdated as it was in the past, 2019 satellite imagery, it's now updated. And I would argue and say 2024 onwards, because, to be honest, I can't remember the last time I looked at Google Maps, Google Earth imagery, whether it was in 24 or 23. Something tells me it would have been in 2024 for sure. For sure it would have been in 2024. Yeah. And when looking then, it was still 2019, but only now, from yesterday when I checked for the first time in a few weeks, let's call it, it was brand new. So we've got 2024 satellite imagery now. Is it of use within the case? I mean, I guess so. We see what's changed and what's been moved about. That can be for a separate video too. So just like with the Don Hatley one and his emotions, we've got things to look at and new ideas to cover. So with all the comments being out the way now, let's just briefly head on over to the Find Dylan Rounds Facebook page and see the post about the phone. Here we are, also known as Dylan's Legacy page, the long-term future, and for helping others out there. Scrolling on down, that's an old one, 2022. I said not much else going on here, but this bit here. When I first read it, I wondered what it was all about, but it's talking about the past, but I guess I've only just heard about it now. Saying, we saw the story yesterday about Dylan Rounds, looked up this group on Facebook, then looked up on the case. I'm so happy the neighbour has been charged, or grifter, whatever you want to call the scum. Dylan may have made that video as his last act, or the scum was stupid enough. Either way, it doesn't matter. I'm just happy it happened now to get him to show you where Dylan is. So basically, this person, Gloria, has heard about the Dylan Rounds case in recent time. So they're new to the case, new to the community. They're not going to know everything all at once, in case you're wondering, right? But they've heard about the phone, Dylan's phone, I guess, being found, and what was found on it at a later point, the time-lapse footage of Brenner cleaning a gun, blood on him, washing it off, etc. And that Brenner was charged with the murder and desecration of Dylan Rounds. And we heard about that March 3rd, 2023 onwards during that East Idaho News interview. Okay? As for the bit about making him talk and show where Dylan is, well, previously that has been mentioned, and basically if the family ever get that opportunity, they're going to turn it down because they don't want help from Brenner. That's the short story there. Response-wise, this is where we get the link here. And as for the responses, this person says, okay, what did I miss? Was there new updates? No, there wasn't. Gloria says, I don't know when the update was. It was in the past of 2023, but it was brought to the attention of police in 2022, November 14th. The family heard about it many months later, just how it was at the time, because I guess we're being sensitive information. Gloria says, I just watched the show on television. Right, said the Dylan Rounds documentary. So Gloria, are you aware that the Dylan Rounds documentary used footage from my channel without consent, copyright, and in addition, later having the cheek to copyright me for just using a small bit of their footage whilst crediting them and also doing most of my original analysis on it, and on top the original documentary that you watched slandered my name. Thought I'd just mention it just in case people weren't aware. But yeah, Gloria says, anyway, whilst Googling, I found this group, Facebook. They found Dylan's phone in the pond. It had a video of the neighbour with a bloody shirt and Dylan's gun cleaning himself off. So they charged him. It's been delayed, but he goes back to court in April, I believe. No, that's wrong. I'll correct that in a second. So either Dylan wasn't totally expired and hit the phone to record, or he was truly that stupid, Brenner, to record himself red-handed. Either way, does not matter. He is guilty. Right. Response. Yes, this guy is very guilty and he very well knows what he did to Dylan and he needs to tell where he is now. I'm not settling for some free get-out-of-jail card for him. He took a life, and that align also the PD department scene where he was doing and never did anything, and my hopes these guys now are atrocious human beings for putting his family through this nightmare. Right, so basically, when it comes to Brenner's next appearance in court, if you want to call it that, as for the date, it's not April, it's May 15th, 16th, round about then. Still some time off, right? But it is where it is. Now, we need to move on to this article, mercurynews.com. Never seen it before. The title of this article reads, Missing Teen's Phone Mysteriously Recorded Video of Murder Suspect. Now, in terms of this article or page, it was hard to get a hold of first of all because of pop-ups on the screen, but thankfully, due to the device what I'm using, the same brand that Dylan Rounds had as a phone, an iPhone, you've got the reader mode, which bypasses all the BS, hence why we can read it on screen right now. But speaking of Dylan Rounds' phone, you can see the details here and we'll analyse as we go along. The subheading reads, Dylan Rounds is thought to have been dead when the images were captured. So what's very interesting here is wording it as images captured on Dylan's phone. Now, an image is different compared to a video. And in terms of a time lapse, well, you get time lapse videos, but you also get time lapse photos, two different versions, okay? And for how the story's been told all this time, and by Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds of course, right? That's a key point, that. And all the other news articles. It's been described as a video, watching a video. But here, it's referring it to images. And a few outsiders in the Dylan Rounds case have mentioned the possibility of it just being photos, hence the time lapse, with the timestamp provided as when it was taken, like a photo, or something like that. But to be honest, you have to be pressing the button multiple times for the different photos and angles, and I guess your finger hand would have to be on it, I guess. Because, if it was done a bit differently, like when I've done my time lapses, I've hit the record button and it's recorded it like a normal video, and then it's processed it afterwards and sped the video up. So a slow process as a plant growing or evaporation of water. You place the camera there for 5 to 10 hours. And then once you finish the video and it's processed, it's about a 2 to 5 minute video sped up. So you see the transformation and change much quicker. right? There might be a possibility that that's the same how it was with Brenner, and they had to slow the video down because it was that fast, because it was only for a short period of time the time lapse was on. And why would it be a time lapse? Out of all the other methods and ways of recording something, right? Because as it's worded here, that Dylan Rounds, or maybe it was worded elsewhere. It was definitely worded by other people with time, but the possibility that Dylan Rounds could have been the one to have recorded it himself, his final moments before death. But if you was to do that, why would you select time lapse? Probably because you're not quite thinking and you're in a rush. You're not going to be figuring out, right, I'm going to just select that option. I'm going to change the quality to 1080. I'm going to select 30 frames, or should I select 60 frames per second here? Do I put it into 4K or not? You wouldn't be thinking like that at the time, and definitely not with Dylan because he had an older iPhone, so less availability when it comes to certain settings. But time-lapse being a thing back then, I guess. But normal video recording too, and taking a photo. So the other possibility as to why it was specifically a time lapse was because a person accidentally set it to that and accidentally hit the record button, such as Brenner himself. Now, we can do maybe an additional analysis and narration later on past this article if needed, and we can always look back to the area, roughly speaking, in regards to Brenner's trailer. Okay, but let's just focus on what's mentioned here first. This is by Bay Area News Group, posted March 13th, 2023 at 1:45 p.m. So this does tie in line with at the time of when all the news was coming out on East Idaho News, and March 3rd, Brenner being charged, and then Kenneth Cooley, Justin Rounds, Nate Eaton doing an interview past that point within the time period, and the article here making notes of it and what was said. Yeah, it all makes sense. It ties in line. This was fresh at the time, but I don't think I ever read this article in particular, so there's no harm in looking at it now. Is there anything to analyse as for the title, right? The language and wording, because it is important. Missing teen's phone. Dylan Rounds being the missing individual at the time. The phone being found at the pond, Lucin Pond. But this is more so in particular to the deep forensic dive on Dylan's found phone, and the mysterious recorded video of the murder suspect Brenner. Would you call it mysterious, how it captured Brenner? You could say it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience for the right reasons, that it was like there was an angel watching over Dylan or somebody to be able to record this as a form of evidence and proof, because Brenner supposedly being the only one in possession of Dylan's phone at the time, yet it was able to capture him doing what he was doing. Was it intended by Brenner? Probably not. Was it intended by Dylan? That's what some people argue. Let's scroll down. Breaking news. After murder charges were filed in the case of the missing teenage farmer, prosecutors in Utah have revealed that a crucial piece of evidence was mysteriously captured on the victim's phone. There's Dylan. Here it reads, James Brenner, 59 years old at the time, was charged on March 3rd with aggravated murder in connection with the disappearance last year of Dylan Rounds, 19 years old, who lived by himself on his small farm near Lucin in Utah's northwest corner. Now, most of this checks out, including the date, March 3rd, but where it mentions about Dylan living by himself at a farm near Lucin, well, it's within Lucin. Dylan didn't live at his farm. He stayed there here and there when he was doing farm work. Dylan Rounds was on the move. He did bounce about from place to place, from family to grandparents to supposedly Kurt Wadsworth, Montello, and doing custom farm work elsewhere. So Dylan didn't live on his farm. It's worded wrong here, okay? It says, in his last phone call to family, as you can see, it says his last phone call to family, Karen Rounds, on May 28th at around 6:51 a.m. Rounds told his grandmother it was going to rain and he needed to put his grain truck in the shed that was 5 miles from where he was living. True. Brenner lived in a camper near the shed, the grain shed. Correct. Squatting, does it mention that? doesn't seem to be the case. That makes a change for once. Dylan Round's boots spotted with his blood were found near the shed on May 30th, the first day his family went looking for him. 3 weeks later, his phone was recovered from a nearby pond, Lucin Pond. Now, as for Dylan Round's boots, seems to check out there. But in regards to the blood, it's saying that his blood, Dylan's blood, was on his own boot. Is that correct? I remember in the past it was worded as there was a patch, a little bit of blood on one of the shoes, on one of the boots, dried up. But then there was some people in the background, awkward people in the Dylan Rounds community, typical, that were saying, well, actually, is it really blood? It could actually be animal blood. It might not be anything, right? And then you had Salty Pancakes supposedly faking or staging a boot and including it in the case, trying to cause some kind of disruption, which was really early on. Whether it was true or faked by Pancakes, it was weird behaviour by an individual who supposedly was focused on the case. Does anyone remember that? It was the one which I covered in addition at the time with Dylan Rounds, that TikTok video or something of Dylan being on a Segway and it shows his boots, and I was comparing it to a photo of a boot elsewhere or something with a stain on. It was a weird time, and that was early on in the case. But yeah, phone found, Lucin Pond. The blood part about Dylan's boots, I can't remember whose blood it was. If you want to add on down below, feel free to do so. A forensic examination of Dylan's phone yielded a startling clue. Video that reportedly showed Brenner wearing a bloody shirt whilst he cleaned blood from his hands and from a gun. That shirt was seized by investigators, and it was found to have Round's DNA on it. Box Elder County District Attorney's Office said below. We'll read that shortly. Right. It's interesting, though, how the subheading or the title, I think it was more so the subheading, just quick look up here. Where was it? Yeah. Dylan Rounds is thought to have been dead when the images were captured. And as it's mentioned here, it says that forensic examination yielded a startling clue. Video that reportedly showed Brenner. A video. See, there's a difference between an image, like a photo, and a video. You can turn a video into an image by simply pausing it and taking a screenshot. So there is that option. But they've kind of contradicted themselves here, haven't they? I've always known this as a video, right? You know, the outsiders and people within the Dylan Rounds community and YouTube streets that badger on, and I'm not saying badger the username, but it is a saying in English language. They badger on about, oh, it wasn't a phone call, it was a text message conversation. Well, how it's been worded by everyone and family too, and the receiver, it was a phone call there. So that ticks that off the list. But then this one here, right, where people are saying, oh, is it a video? Is it a photo? No, it's a photo. It can't be a video. Well, it's been worded as a video here. So what? So what? Justin Round says this. Justin Round says that. Blah, 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 blah. All these third-party representatives. Well, hold up a minute. Calm down. Simmer down. Give me a second. Because it was Justin Rounds that described it as a video and watching it, right? So all the third-party rejects out there that go against the narrative, that have the alternative truth, and also say that Justin knows, or that they've received it from Justin. Well, the last time Justin Rounds spoke about this was him describing it on East Idaho News, March 3rd, 2023 onwards. And he said he watched Brenner cleaning the gun, cleaning his hands, washing blood off them, as in a video format. Not photos, but a video. The family say it, the news articles say it, it's been worded like that all over. And it's some random online third-party people that go against it. Yeah, kind of outnumbered, right? Their own master, their own daddy, who they look up to and get intel from, is saying something completely different to what they're saying. Not a good look, is it? But, you know, it's all under control here. And as for a video, to be able to go into some form of depth to describe it, and for Justin Rounds at the time to say it was weird to watch, and it was also kind of aggravating as well, knowing what Brenner did at that point or just before, and watching him so calm and cleaning himself down, in which Dylan's blood could have been on him at the time, right? You get what I'm saying? How Justin Rounds described it was as if you've just watched a film, or you've watched just a video in general, and you've got a negative response from it, which is understandable because it would be weird, it would be hard for the family to react watching to a video knowing what they're watching is shortly after Dylan's death and murder, in which when you see Brenner covered in blood, it's not exactly pleasant, is it? Because you don't know where Dylan is, you haven't found him yet, but knowing what Brenner could have done to Dylan based off the gore and the blood, it seems a bit, not so pleasant. So there's that. Anything else? I guess the bit that stood out to me, and it's always been worded like this, that the shirt of Brenner's seized later. Dylan Round's DNA was found on the shirt. But whenever they mentioned about Brenner with blood on his shirt and Brenner with blood on his hands and on his sleeves, they didn't say that was the blood of Dylan Rounds. They just said there was blood and DNA of Dylan. So I can understand some people in the past were trying to figure out and say, well, okay, DNA of Dylan's on it, but that blood doesn't mean to say it's Dylan's. But at least from what I've been saying with time, common sense would make you think, well, if the timestamps and the phone pings tie up in line together from when Dylan was alive to the point of his last breath, and then the after effect, and Brenner, the state he was in physically with the blood on him, and DNA of Dylan on it, you would think that, well, if Dylan is presumed dead and Brenner has been charged with the murder of Dylan, and that in that time and that space on that day, Brenner just happened to have a fair bit of blood on him and DNA of Dylan, you'd probably assume that, okay, that blood as well was DNA of Dylan, even though it wasn't quite worded like that. Common sense would point in that direction. Now, moving on. Round's mother, Candice Cooley, told East Idaho News that the video was time-stamped 7:27 a.m. on May 28th, half an hour after her son ended his call to his grandmother. Exactly. She said the family was shocked to hear that the phone captured the scene when Rounds was believed to have been dead. Dylan. Yeah, okay, scene. In quotes, how did that phone start recording? It has driven us crazy, Cooley told the news. I'm pretty sure when Brenner took the phone, he just hit the wrong button or had a wrong swipe and had no clue. True. Brenner is to be arraigned April 24th, so that's old news there. But in terms of what's been mentioned above, you get the details and descriptions here and how it reconfirms it was a video, not a photo time-lapse, but a video to watch and pick up on. So that being in mind, let's look into the idea of who recorded the video, how the camera was pointing in that direction to pick up on Brenner too. So what you're looking at on screen right now is the Grainshed property, the land, and we're looking west over in that direction. It is marked out, credit to East Idaho News. Did they take the photo? Maybe, but they marked it at least, so you're familiar with the locations. I thought, why not look at a ground level perspective instead of Google Earth all the time? And I'll have to look back at Google Earth because I need to see if the trailer's there or not. It shouldn't be. And just like here, it's not because it was taken away and checked out. Now, as a reference point, the trailer that Brenner was in, his camper, was the one that Dylan Rounds bought him in the past. Okay, we're not talking about the RV home, which still remains on site till this day. Brenner was borrowing that and just staying in it temporary. Dylan later bought Brenner his own camper trailer, hence why it's no longer there now, because it was taken away in the investigation. And it's important for this discussion and talking point today because that time-lapse footage, that video from Dylan's phone depicting Brenner with blood on him after the murder of Dylan, as it's presumed, this all took place in that camper, the one Dylan bought him in the past, right? In the distance, you've got the dirt mound, which, to be fair, it's not been talked about since, has it? That's probably because not much was found over that way besides the boots. But for some time, there was lots of references to it, searches done, and contradictions as well. And a few interesting finds in that direction. Credit to Glorindellen for her footage. When I analysed it at the time, when you saw those flies around the dirt mound and some half-buried items, one looked like a shoebox, right? But that aside, you see how it's mapped out. You can visualize it as we tell the story right now. So in that bare patch where that first arrow is pointing down at the ground, the bare patch where Brenna's trailer was at, his camper, we'll call it trailer, okay? And inside of that trailer, ground level, inside, the phone of Dylan's, and it captured Brenna. But how? How could that have happened? And in what angle was it? Because that little part can mean a big difference, to be honest, okay? And I'll touch upon it a bit more shortly. But how it first came out, okay? We don't need to do the descriptions of what was caught on footage because we already read it out before on the news article, okay? But if you wanted to, think of it in this way, this footage which shows Brenna cleaning himself up, cleaning a gun, which could have been the murder weapon, which was used on Dylan, right? Brenna appearing cool and calm, not fazed by it, as described by Justin, who watched the video himself, as he described it on East Idaho News. It's trying to understand how long was the footage. I don't think it was that long. I don't think it was. And when did it actually start, the recording? I guess it's inside of the trailer as it was described because no other locations were described. So you envision it like this. Brenna walking into his trailer after the murder of Dylan. Did the desecration take place before the time-lapse video? Yes or no? That's uncertain. Maybe a temporary burial did take place, as that is a form of desecration. Bury Dylan for now, and then dispose of him properly later. But in the meantime, Brenna going back to his trailer, cleaning himself up. It would make sense, right? Some people were suggesting, was Dylan Rounds still alive, though, up to that point? Even though the majority do think, and the family do think, well, at the 7:27 a.m. timestamp of that time-lapse footage, Dylan's already long gone by then, within that 30-minute difference of Dylan making the call at the grain shed gate and then making it down to the shed and then being taken out there, and then later, the time-lapse footage. I'm going to try and understand it from different points of views, okay? And we can make more sense of all this by first asking the question, who was responsible for hitting the record button and selecting, let's say, time-lapse? Would Brenna, right, after what Brenna's done, would Brenna think to himself, right, I'll hit the record button, I'll set the phone aside and carry on with what I'm doing so I can record myself? Serial killers may do that because they get off from it. Brenna doesn't come across quite as a serial killer because he isn't one. He hasn't killed multiple people over a course of time undetected, right? This is his first kill, supposedly, right? Some people say the opposite in the background, that he has done other stuff in the past. I've only heard it in the official court documents as like malicious wounding or attempted murder, which was later reduced to just a wounding, fatal, right? So a few charges were dropped or lessened in severity and stuff, so that seems to be it there. But it's going to be either one of two things with hitting the record button. Either Brenna accidentally did it himself, or Dylan did it as a means of defending himself, or at least recording key evidence, so then there could be justice afterwards. If that really was the case, was Dylan thinking at the time, I'm going to make it through? Or did he already know his time was up, but he wanted to leave a key bit of evidence with the family? so they could get justice for Dylan and make Brenner pay, I wonder. Whilst that may have happened in the past or in other real life situations, I just didn't think Dylan Rounds would be responsible for that. I think we can actually narrow it down, shorten it to the fact that this time-lapse footage was of inside Brenner's trailer and only the trailer. So when the time-lapse footage was activated, let's say, it was inside of the trailer. If Dylan Rounds accidentally hit the record button before his death, that would mean Dylan Rounds was inside Brenner's trailer at the time of dying, right? If we're basing it off how it's been described, time-lapse footage of Brenner inside his trailer, that was it. No other locations given, so it's assumed that the video started recording when Brenner was in his own trailer, and if it was accidental by Brenner, it would make sense. He's in possession of Dylan's phone. If Dylan Rounds was to have recorded it in an attempt to get evidence, it would mean that Dylan was inside of Brenner's trailer at the time of when Dylan was dying, or on the verge of being killed, if you want to call it that. But really, if Dylan Rounds did that, was Dylan holding the phone whilst Brenner was in the trailer cleaning? Is that even possible? I mean, surely it would have given it away that if Brenner turned around and then saw Dylan was holding the phone in his hands, Brenner would have come on over and finished Dylan off, or took the phone out of his hands and, smashed the phone on the floor or hit the stop record button. And surely, if that did happen, Justin Rounds would have described it when he watched it back. He didn't. So I'd be thinking that Dylan wasn't in the trailer at the time, and that Dylan didn't hit the record button, because Dylan would had to have been inside of the trailer to have been possibly responsible for hitting the record button. As I said, the time-lapse footage was only described as in Brenner's trailer. So the only way of Dylan being responsible for the footage would mean Dylan would have had to have been inside the trailer at the time. And because there was no indication of that, and Justin Rounds didn't describe anything that gave off that hint, and Justin Rounds didn't mention anything about heavy or deep breathing or wheezing in the background from Dylan's dying breath. None of that was mentioned. None of that detail, because it just doesn't exist. So it can't be Dylan inside of the trailer. And if Dylan's not inside of the trailer, then he couldn't have hit the time-lapse button, could he? The exception, right? The exception where you could say Dylan Rounds may have hit the record button as a last-ditch attempt of getting evidence on Brenner after what he's done, that would only be applicable if the time-lapse described it as outside near to the grain shed, then made one's way into the trailer. Yeah, you could say Dylan was on the outside of the trailer of where he was taken out near to the shed, and in that moment he could have hit the record button. None of that was mentioned. So I'd come to the conclusion and debunk it that Dylan Rounds did not record that footage on his phone. It wasn't Dylan. I believe it's Brenner, and it was accidental. Because I don't think Brenner is stupid enough or the extreme of a serial killer to record his own doing. Because if you were really that far gone, you'd probably record yourself or record the body as well, which didn't happen. So I think it's a simple, clumsy, clunky accident, right? You're inside of a camper trailer, not exactly a big one, shuffling about, Brenner being a big size, whilst in possession of Dylan's phone. Why did Brenner take Dylan's phone, right? What was the whole purpose behind that? So Dylan wouldn't be traced or tracked to where he's at? Yeah, I guess it would make sense. But why take the phone on the spot in that moment? Why not later when you're disposing of Dylan, right? If you're on the verge of disposing of somebody, any contents or items that dead body may have on them which could be traceable, you would take off the body and dispose of them elsewhere, and then dispose the body in a different location. So that if ever a person or people traced the device, like a phone, tracked it to the last phone ping, they may find the phone, but they would not be finding the body with it because they were separated at the time of disposing. So that's why it makes me wonder, right? Before that time-lapse video and the ping of it, or the timestamp of the video, 7:27 from Dylan's phone inside Brenner's trailer, just before that and just after the murder of Dylan, within that 30-minute period from when Dylan made the first call to Karen Rounds, the grandmother, up to the 7:27 time stamp of the footage after Dylan's death and Brenner cleaning up, in between that 30-minute period, besides Dylan being killed, what else happened? Did Brenner kill and dispose Dylan in 30 minutes? Is that possible? Yes or no? It probably seems a bit unrealistic unless it was done in a rushed way. You've taken Dylan out, maybe you panic, maybe you don't, and then you think, right, I'll dispose of him temporarily on the spot, in the location, nearby for sure. Because if it was any further away, it would not tie in line with that 30-minute period, as we discussed and how it's been established. So a temporary burial, maybe. It falls under desecration. If that did happen, that moment of disposing of Dylan would make sense to take Dylan's phone away, so that if the phone was traced, it wouldn't lead you to where Dylan's body is buried at, whether it be a temporary burial or a future one, a later one, another burial later, right? Does that make sense to people? The other way of looking at it, and maybe it's a normal thing, not that it's normal to kill people, but maybe it's a normal thing that murderers will take items and possessions off people for whatever reason, whether it be to not be traced or for value, for their own interest. They take it off the dead body, but they don't bury the dead body immediately. Would you agree with that? Do you think that's a possibility? That Brenner took out Dylan Rounds in that 30-minute time period, didn't dispose of him immediately, but took the phone away and took it into Brenner's trailer, right? But why would he take Dylan's phone into Brenner's trailer, where phone pings could trace it back to that location and suggest that, oh, Brenner's in possession of that phone of Dylan's? And further reinforcing evidence, which was more critical, of the video inside Brenner's trailer. Why would you take the phone inside of your trailer if it's not your personal possession and you know it can be traced, right? It's kind of obvious as to why Brenner threw it into the pond later, because he thought that would be the best way of destroying and hiding evidence, and that Brenner did not want to bury Dylan with Dylan's phone because Dylan could be traced easier and found. So maybe Brenner was thinking it through partly, but not completely. But, you know, if Brenner takes Dylan's boots, puts them by his trailer, and then moves them on and hides them behind the dirt mound, right? Brenner knows that those boots are not his, Dylan's personal possessions, right? Can the boots be traced digitally? No, but they were found nevertheless. What I'm putting across is, it's interesting how Brenner will take Dylan's phone and put it into his trailer, but when Brenner came across Dylan's boots, I guess at the same time, decided to take them down to the dirt mound. Why dispose of the boots near to the dirt mound, but treat the phone with more importance and take it into your own place of living where it could be traced back? I don't understand that. It doesn't quite make sense. What was Brenner intending on doing with Dylan's phone when in the trailer? Well, not much from what the evidence shows. It was more so Brenner cleaning up after himself and a gun which could have been used on Dylan, right? After that, who knows what happened. But it's just interesting that Brenner would even consider taking Dylan's phone off of Dylan and taking it into his own trailer where it could be further incriminating, right? With or without the time-lapse footage, right? So in doing so, by taking the phone, Brenner taking the phone off Dylan and taking it into his trailer, that was the enabling factor for that turning point, that groundbreaking evidence. It wasn't planned by Brenner, likely, but it happened through a mistake, right? So when Brenner took the phone off Dylan, likely, and then walked back to his trailer, in doing so, maybe opening the trailer door, climbing on in, placing it down, dropping it on the bench, on the chair, on the bed, wherever it was, in that process, accidentally fumbling around with the phone screen with Brenner's hands. I don't know if Brenner has big hands or not, but if he did, accidentally pressing the wrong button. And it is possible to do that. I've done it myself, okay? So for the people that don't believe Candice Cooley, who says that Brenner was the one that accidentally hit the record button, right? I've done it myself accidentally, and I didn't even have to test it, okay? Candice Cooley said she tested it with the old iPhones, similar to what Dylan Rounds had at the time, okay? Yeah, when you test something, you might get the desired result that you want. So there's a level of a researcher biased effect, right? In a way, you want something to happen, it might happen, right? But based off natural experience, not planned, not wanted, it's happened where I've done videos in the past and I've stopped or I've started, and then in between I've ended up having some additional clips of me just sat there or standing still, unaware that the video, the camera, was on record. My phone, my iPhone, being on record because I accidentally hit the record button, or I was on my lock screen and then accidentally fumbled with my hand and finger, swiped up, activated the camera, and then another accidental press hit the record button. It can happen, right? If you've got a phone in your hand, you may accidentally press the lock screen or the power button, which activates it. Then your hand might slide across the screen if you're moving about, and then you activate the camera that way, or instant record, depending on what the older iPhones were like, which Dylan had, right? It is possible to accidentally record a video by your own doing, and it's not planned. And with Brenner being a bit clumsy and probably not thinking, yeah, he probably did hit the record button. So that's my conclusion. Brenner was the one to record himself inadvertently, accidentally, not planned. But it happened, and to most people, thank God it did, because it's key evidence, right? Now, what about the angling and position of the phone, right? For it to record Brenner, normally, if something is pointing towards, if the camera is pointing towards someone, normally it's associated with either a person holding the device and pointing it in that direction for their desired view to capture something, or it's been set up by somebody, placed down or put on a tripod, and then hit the record or capture button to then record or take a photo of what's in the distance or in that direction, right? In that view. Is that's what happened here? Well, it can't be, because I've debunked it that it wasn't Dylan Rounds, because Dylan would have had to have been in the trailer at the time, which there was no indication of that. So, and I also said that it's unlikely that Brenner purposely recorded himself doing what he did, because there's not enough consistency there to come to that conclusion from my opinion only. So if you tie it in line with an accidental hit of the record button, maybe once Brenner entered into the trailer, he got Dylan's phone, fumbled around with it, whether he had it in his pocket temporarily and pulled it out. So fingering the phone led to that recording. And then maybe Brenner chucked the phone onto the countertop, or he chucked the phone onto the bed, or chucked the phone onto a chair. Whatever's in Brenner's trailer. I've never seen the inside, unfortunately. If anybody has photos of Brenner's trailer, not to be confused with Profiling Evil's recent video of the other RV home, which wasn't owned by Brenner, nor really mainly intended for Brenner, because it was Ed's. We're talking about Brenner's personal camper trailer, the one that Dylan bought for him, okay? If anyone has photos of that trailer, Let me know down below, okay, out of interest. Because if we could see what's inside Brenna's trailer, we could get a better understanding as to where was the phone placed, or where was the phone dumped? Where was Brenna in the trailer at the time of what happened and what was recorded? Was it small? Was it cramped? Could that be a factor to take all it in mind, right? But in terms of my opinion of how things played out, Brenna going into the trailer, placing the phone down gently or chucking it, maybe chucking it, maybe throwing it. I mean, what about Dylan's boots? Remember that? It was described that how they looked, it was as if Dylan's boots were chucked behind the dirt mound or chucked over the dirt mound. They weren't gently placed, they were thrown down, right? So maybe the same with Dylan's phone. It was chucked or thrown onto the countertop or the bed, bench, whatever, right? And it's how the phone fell on the floor, or how the phone fell on the surface, I should say, right? Now, it depends what phone you have first of all, right? Not all phones are the same shape or size. The phone that I have, along with a phone case, it can stand up. It can stand up vertical and it can stand up horizontal. It will fall over if you give it a nudge or there's a breeze, but you can balance it so it's standing. But with other phones which are more curved and slim, no chance at all. The only way you could do it is if you had a tripod or you had a leather phone case which had a flap which could be used as a prop to prop it up and hold it up, right? I don't know if Dylan Rounds had a phone case on his iPhone, because if he did, it would have made it more chunkier, weighted, and more stable. iPhones in general, besides the odd exception, are quite blocky in that shape, like a rectangle, chunky. iPhones can be chunky and thick, right? They're not the biggest phones out there, but in terms of how they're constructed and the shape of them, they can stand up or be propped up more easier without additional items, okay? So the chances of chucking an iPhone of Dylan's onto the surface, there's a chance it could have stood up or been propped up. It depends what items are present, right? Let's say you had a little couch or a seat, right? And the armrest isn't too high. And you've chucked the phone onto it, it's hit the surface, it's bounced about a little bit, and did it stand up? Did it hit the corner, bounce back up, and then lean back onto the side of the armrest or the backrest? And it just so happens that the back-facing camera, which is probably what was used in the time-lapse video, the back-facing camera just so happened to land, stood up and pointing towards Brenna. It is possible. I'm sure you can do equations and calculate the angle, the velocity, and all that mathematical stuff and the probability of it all. I can't do that. I'm not an expert. I'm not good at maths. But it's definitely possible, at least, that when the phone is chucked down, especially an iPhone, and depending what surface it lands on and what other items are around, it could be stood up or it could be propped up by the time it makes impact and as it bounces back up if it does, right? How would I know? Well, in ways of looking at it, sometimes when I've been walking about and I've chucked the phone, I have chucked my phone onto the chair. It's landed on the cushion, it bounced up, it flipped up, the screen was up against the backrest of the chair and the camera was pointing right at me. It wasn't even planned, but it happened. So similar to Brenna, same thing could have happened. Chuck the phone, dump it on a chair or something, and it landed straight up. And it's supported by whatever's behind it, like a backrest. And the cameras just happen to be pointing towards Brenna. It's happened to me. It can happen to Brenna, right? I've had my own experiences with chucking a phone and it ends up standing up or at least being horizontal and the camera facing me, right? So it's possible that that's what could have happened with Brenna, right? If it's a hard surface and there's nothing supporting it or there's no like backrest or anything like that, maybe the phone could fall flat, but in this case it wasn't, because how it was described was the the phone was pointing towards Brenner. So there would have been some factors in place. Now, the optional one could be if Brenner was sitting down whilst he was doing his thing. Maybe Brenner sat down or nearby and Dylan's phone was in his pocket and it slipped out. And as you sat down, the phone slips out, rolls to the side and just so happens to stand up but horizontal because of the shape of the phone and maybe if it's propped up or up against something. That's happened to me as well. I've sat down with the phone in my pocket, it's fallen out. But because I'm up against the chair and the arm rest, the support part, the phone's ended up falling out and being up against that too. So that when I stand up and move away, the phone is stood up horizontally with the camera facing me. It's happened. It doesn't happen often, but when it's happened, it's happened. So that could have occurred with Brenner as well, whether he chucked it or if it slipped out of his pocket. Now, one key factor as well, besides not knowing what the trailer looks like inside, that would massively help determine what was what and how it played out with the phone and how it was placed or how it was chucked, okay? The other factor would be to know that time-lapse video, that footage from Dylan's phone, was it recorded horizontal or vertical? That would make it a bit more interesting, would it? Let me know your thoughts down below to what you think of my analysis there with that all in mind. Any other items of interest here? Don't think so. I know Glorindellen walked past this point. I don't know if this footage or screenshot was from Glorindellen and then it was added on by East Idaho News. I can't remember which one came first, to be honest, but nevertheless, you get the idea of what the area looks like, and I used this photo whilst narrating. Even though there was no trailer here, you can see where it was once at, and hopefully you were able to visualise it all when I was trying to make sense of the situation. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, found it interesting. Feel free to like and share the video to spread awareness, so it keeps the case alive and more people can find this important video. Because yes, the evidence of this video footage of on Dylan's phone is very important and a key turning point in the case, but trying to understand how it unfolded is just as important. And I think I did debunk the odd thing today. And this is based off from my experience because I've got the same phone brand as what Dylan had. Not the same model, but nevertheless, you think of the shape, the size, the weight of these phones, how they land, how they fall is different to other phone brands and makes out there. So it's worth taking into perspective. And I've had my own experiences with how phones can accidentally record something or how you place it down or how you throw it down, how it stands back up or, how it looks once it's made impact to the ground. I'm not saying that I go about chucking phones on concrete. No, I do it on soft surfaces, right? But how it can land is unexpected. Not impossible. There's always a possibility, okay? So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time, whenever that is. Goodbye and good night for now.